But could you give us some particular examples for the British fauna when species have extended their ranges due to migration, if there are any?
I don't know. There's one animal which has definitely extended its range in the last few decades, probably in relation to the general warming of the climate, and that is the speckled wood butterfly, which is now a common butterfly in the Manchester area. It used not to be. That one is undoubtedly extended. If you take moths, there are a couple of day-flying moths called tiger moths, Jersey tiger moth and the scarlet tiger moth, which are very much southern English species. In the 1930s, the Jersey tiger moth was known in Jersey, of course, why it was called that, but it was established around the Exe estuary in Devon. It's now quite widespread in southern England. It's certainly common around, not common, but it occurs sporadically around London. And the scarlet tiger moth is another case rather similar, slightly more widely distributed, but that has moved further north in recent years. Both these are cases where the larvae overwinter as quite small larvae, and they both have rather poor ability to go into suspended animation. We call it diapause. If a caterpillar goes into diapause, it will become completely inanimate and not feed. These things don't do this very successfully, so as the weather gets warmer, they tend to come out and look for food. And there seems to have been a problem in the British winter in the past, that it would get warm enough for the caterpillars to come out seeking food, but not warm enough for there to actually be regrowth of new food for them to eat. If you're in more moderate winter conditions, they can survive because they can find something to eat, and if you're in more continental conditions, they can survive because they stay thoroughly cold for the whole winter. So the scarlet tiger moth, for example, lives only in the south of England, but it lives perfectly successfully in Scandinavia. Now that has extended its range, and that may be, I think, because of climatic amelioration taking place in winter. If you're thinking about adults, of course, adult butterflies, it's warm summers which will probably make them go further north. So we have a complicated pattern. We've been losing species or having reduction in range of species due to various agricultural changes and that kind of thing, and this other complementary process which might lead to them getting further north. And I don't think we're clear what the balance is at the moment. It's a little bit uncertain. Some things seem to have moved further north and some things have in fact contracted.
You mentioned that one of the particular species, like a painted lady, has been studied in more detail. Could you give us more details about this particular species?
Yes, there's been quite a large study recently which was coordinated by the Rothamsted Research Lab in Harpenden. It's a European-wide one, and there have been several different people studying the painted lady independently in different countries, using radar tracking and also using volunteers to supply information on individual sightings. If you get enough of those, then you can get a picture of patterns of change in numbers throughout the year. And there has been a survey study called Butterfly Watch, I think, which has been examining the movement of painted ladies for the last several years, in successive years, so that we get a much more detailed picture of what changes take place. This has become of interest. I have a newspaper page here which shows a large painted lady in the middle of it, which is an account really of this study that's been taking place, because it's become a matter of general public interest. And here is a screen grab picture off a screen of the Migrant Watch website, which individuals can add their own data to. You simply log in on here. This is the British Isles here, completely green in this map because all the blobs that have been put on are so close together that they've covered the whole country. And you can expand this picture, and if you take the Manchester area, for example, you can see the individual records. These are for 1915, and this has been going for a few years now. And there has been a survey of painted ladies and also of hummingbird hawk moths during this period, which supplies a great deal of new information, very valuable information, which gives us a much more detailed account of how these changes and movements have taken place. So partly it's a highly technical business of using radar, and partly it's a matter of getting citizen science moving and getting individuals to supply their own facts, which gives us a much broader picture of what is going on, and gives us much more insight into the kind of factors that are involved in survival or otherwise of a species when it's migrating.
That's very interesting. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that some species reduced distribution in the UK, and some species might have disappeared. Do you know how many species approximately have become extinct from the British fauna, and what could be reasons for that?
It's difficult to tell because it's difficult to establish exactly how many species, what the baseline is, how many species we start from. If we take the 19th century list, there were about 70 species, and of those a handful have certainly become extinct. And the reasons for these are varied. One reason that was put forward in the past was simply over-collecting, and that may be the case. There's a butterfly called the Glanville fritillary, which was found on the Isle of Wight in the 1820s, I think, and had every collector in Britain in the subsequent next few decades wanted their series of Glanville fritillaries, and the numbers went right down. I'm not sure whether they have survived this depredation or not, but that was one of the factors which hit the rare species. There are others which are quite interesting because they have changed, they became threatened because of changes in agricultural practice which are quite subtle. One of them is the heath fritillary, so called, but it likes to live in coppiced woodlands which supply open areas. Coppicing of woodland used to be carried out in the 19th century and earlier in order to produce withies that could be used for making baskets and palings and this kind of thing, which involves cutting down low a number of trees in a patch in a woodland, which can then grow up with thin runners. And this supplies what the heath fritillary needed, so that when we gave up coppicing, because we've given up that kind of industry, the habitat disappeared. Another, even in a way stranger example is the large blue, which used to be a relatively common species, but it was always on the edge of its range in Britain. It required it required calcareous land where there were vetches which the adults could lay the eggs on. The caterpillars then needed to be laid, the adults needed to lay a few eggs together because the caterpillars ate each other, so that the first ones that came out would feed on the others, which gave them a boost to get started. And after a while, those caterpillars migrated off the plants and into ants' nests, and they then produced honey from glands, and the ants would allow the caterpillars to feed on ant larvae while they milked them for the nectar. So there was an interesting little connection here. But the ants themselves are find it difficult to live in Britain, so that the best places for them to live were southward facing calcareous, quite steep scarp slopes, for example in the Cotswolds, which at one time were pretty heavily grazed by cattle or goats or sheep, and they would have somebody out, a shepherd or a young lady probably, out there looking after these animals and keeping the grass down, which allowed the vetches and other plants to grow in between, allowed more sunlight to reach the ground, and allowed the ants to have a more favourable environment than they would in denser vegetation. So all of those factors went together. We changed our agricultural practice and the animal became extinct. I wonder if it really completely became extinct. It may have done, but it's been brought back by a careful conservation process in the southwest of England in recent years. Others have suffered very badly from simply the mass use of insecticides, but we're better at controlling that nowadays. Also, the range of species to be seen in any one place has suffered from the removal of hedgerows, which has been a process going on for 100 years or so, and has changed the characters of the fauna very, very greatly over this period.
Do you think that natural history museums in general could contribute in studying or monitoring migration of butterflies and moths?
I think they are tremendously important because they have historical collections which hopefully are labelled and have location data on them, and if one analyses these, one can find out a tremendous amount about patterns of distribution in the past, and will provide great insights into questions of migration, for example. It's a question of asking the question, really. First of all, people collected, and they didn't really know why they were collecting, but as we go on, we find more and more reasons to interrogate these collections and look at them from a new point of view. And when you do this, they are very enlightening. So I think, yes, indeed. And if you take somewhere like the Manchester Museum, it has large and extremely important collections of butterflies. It has material from a gentleman called Sidebottom, who was a local Manchester cotton mill owner, in fact, but a very keen collector of butterflies and beetles and other things. Walsingham collection and a collection of material collected by a gentleman called Michaelis, which are all extremely important national collections of Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths, and they supply an extremely valuable source for further examination from the point of view of looking at migration among other factors.
Yes, I could also add that we've got a very important collection of Roger Dennis, who studied butterflies for a long time. And
Roger Dennis,
yes,
Lloyd,
his collection is here.
Well, and there's the Lloyd collection, which allows you to be a little bit less insular because he has European material, and it's very enlightening for these British Lepidopterists to just go and see what is happening just outside our back door.